Hi, Randy Labonte. Just want to take a moment to speak to you a little bit about design, which is the purposeful actions that teachers take in a community of inquiry. This is where the teacher presence is brought forward to stimulate the cognitive, but also the social, the emotional components that go within that. So it's how you choose to build activities. And there's a couple of models that I do want to speak about that I find useful for myself, but also for the teachers that I work with to help them learn how to best work in teaching in an online learning environment. So, as recall, in the community of inquiry model, which has an indigenous perspective actually built in behind it, as well, the design components are the purposeful actions in teacher presence, other than social and cognitive. So it's where you actually begin to build some interactions within. So the universal design for learning as well as understanding by design models come in handy. And in the reverse order, and you'll see why in just a moment. So when we think in terms of design, we have to think in terms of broader issues, is that it's really, as you look at these two definitions, and I'll allow you to read them, it's systematic, it's planned, it is constructive, it is built towards an end goal and purpose in mind. So it's something that you just don't ad lib. And I know I've spent many times in my classrooms where I've just gone off the cuff, created something, and that's okay. But I do have some design principles and theory or models in my mind, which is what this first series is about, is to give you that conceptual framework and some specific tools to help you to build forward in online in a deliberate fashion. Because in the classroom, we're used to doing the things that we do well and we just repeat them. Whereas now in online, you need to refresh yourself in terms of looking at your instructional approaches, your pedagogy, your design implications, and thinking, because it plays out differently. And we don't have the same experience set in a digital learning environment, online, and sometimes with students even at a distance, as a perspective in which to build from some of our intuitiveness, our understanding, and our past experiences. So really it's a purposeful event that is there. So one model that I found really, really interesting, and it's almost adopted now as my mantra, begin with the end in mind. That's a nice colloquial phrase, and we use that a lot. But in design, it's really, really important that we think to the end outcome and the particular competencies or the actions that we want students to actually provide for us. Because then we can go back and figure out how to account or assess. Oh, and then from there, what activities would allow us to build towards that assessment. So it really is taking our whole process and putting it in reverse. So typically, when I was teaching either in elementary or in secondary, I would begin, okay, we're going to do fractions today. Okay, so in fractions, these are the components that I want to handle in terms of common denominators or something of that nature. So what are the lessons that I want to do? Oh, I'm going to use this one. I'm going to use that one. Oh, wait, how am I going to assess them? Oh, I'll create a test. Okay, so then I create a test. And then at the end of it, did I actually get to the core competencies about understanding what fractions were? Maybe not so much. So looking at what Grant Wiggins and Jay Mateague have done is really important because it looks at the big ideas, which are the competencies, okay, that we're trying to accomplish, which is a great place to start for looking at that. And then looking at assessments in an authentic sort of both formative and summative level as well, but also ways and means to actively engage the learner in those processes. Boil this down into one template that I'm going to share with you that will help us to think that way. So the first thing is you want to identify what are the results you're trying to expect, whether that be curricular goals, essential questions, big ideas, what you want them to be able to know, understand, and do, or to do again for that. Then you need to determine what is the evidence that you're going to look for. Because depending now on the learning environment, we may look for physical evidence of people moving or evidence of students working a problem out in a public area. Or we may look at manifestations of a story, for them telling a story, creating and reading a poem. So there's all kinds of ways that we would determine what evidence would identify the results, or at least demonstrate the results that we're looking for. And then we plan. Then we plan, how do we make that happen? And we use whatever resources that we have at our hand, but also we're cognizant of the learning environment, whether that be a combination of both some in-class physical connections as well as some digital connections online, or whether that's completely online. So that all determines how we plan those things. So again, we're jumping in with the outcome in mind and moving forward in that. And there's one template that's available on the website as well that you can download and use to map out your goals, to map out the results that you're looking for, to figure out what's the evidence that's going to be there, and then, and only then, do you create your learning plan. So it's a nice simple little template. It's a really effective process, and the more you do it, the more you'll actually intuitively think in that fashion when you begin to look at things. Now the other part, which is really important in digital learning spaces, is the universal design for learning. So are there different ways to express it? Because in online, it begins very text heavy when we first begin to do this. And that's not necessarily the right representation or way to engage all of our learners. So, and we expect a uniform action or response. Maybe there's other ways that learners can demonstrate and express their learning and also consume some of the information as well in order to consider how they might demonstrate. And then again, there's different ways to engage in group work, collaborative, through video exchange, chat, text in real time, and also in actual lessons in terms of content. So there are many, many ways to look at learning. The UDL models help us to understand other ways to consider for other learners. So how are we organizing? Are we hitting some of the higher thinking levels in Bloom's taxonomy? How easy is it to navigate? I might know my way around, but I may not be able to actually help a student work their way through. So we need to make it WYSIWYG. As what you see is what you get, as easy as simple. And that's not easy with technologies, as we know, for many of us who have looked at learning Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams, or have looked at a learning management system to determine how do we navigate one step, but how do then we create ways for students to navigate. They're very complex. So it sounds easy in a word, but it's really difficult to continue to do, as well as the graphically pleasing, because again, in a digital learning environment, we don't have them stuck in a desk or in a room, in a box, right? We've got to engage them because there's other things that are out there. Ooh, shiny stars, and they'll be looking at other things, so we have to ensure that, particularly in an online piece. But here's what's interesting about the UDL approach, that you can tie this directly into the community of inquiry framework. It's talking about the interactions between and amongst student and instructor, student and student, which are all in that social connection as well, and student to course materials, which tends to be more in the cognitive as well. So it's the interactivity that's created, which means it's again your role as a teacher in terms of presence to ensure that these happen. So this ties things together nicely, I believe. You can get into this in real depth, and I've provided some links to resources for you, but there's guidelines around how you provide multiple means of expression or representation, and then expression, and then engagement. So there's different ways around in the model, and CAST is a really good sort and resource, and you'll find that in the website there's a reliance a little bit on CAST. But I've also found in the Sept BC resources some other simple templates that you may find useful as well. And then if you really want to go further, well, there's some readings and book chapters in other places that you can look at, but I don't think that's necessarily what you want to do for that. What we tried to do in all of these series, and will continue to do, is to have the information here for you on the website. So the pedagogical model, the community of inquiry, is here. So there's the recording, there's the opportunity to test it out and work with community of inquiry lessons and questions, apply it to your own work in a classroom, or apply it to your work in an online learning class situation. So that's there. It's for you to use. You can do the submit the responses. It's all anonymous. No one's collecting the information for you. But you can also come back to it, so you can bookmark that. Come back to it afterwards, after you've had and played around with some of these ideas, and see if you're thinking differently about those components as well. And then here, you'll see the models and design. We're also engaging learners is the second workshop. We're not there yet, so we don't want to make it live for you just yet. For those of you that are watching this in a recording, yes, it will be there because we'll be past those 2 live sessions that we have set up. But on models and design here, because this is a workshop that is the live session follows the recording of this particular one, is we'll be looking at this on the 9th of September. And we'll be looking in through Zoom at looking at models and designs, but we'll be dialoguing, discussing, testing, sharing to look to. So there's the information from CAST as well as different areas, etc. So that's really something to look at as well. And then there's also the Understanding by Design resources that are here. So it's Grant Wiggins, Jay Mateague. There's a little video there. And then here's the sort of the basic stages, but most important, here's the template. So you can download it from there. There's other resources that you can look to go into depth as well. And we've also provided on this website for you a series of resources for this in terms of available places. So we'll add to this as others come up. If you have particular resources that you think would be helpful for us, then please also share them in the sessions with us and put them in text chat if you're watching us live, or just send a quick email to me in terms of that for adding into this particular First Nations Educators Toolbox. It's there, and it's going to be online for the duration of this year for sure, brought to you from the Ministry of Education through Learn. So we want to thank both the Ministry and Learn for being able to put this together and build this for us, and we're really looking forward to engaging with you during the live sessions or afterwards, as the case may be. So thanks.